Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm really excited to bring you today's video. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Let's get started. A young Buddhist monk, in his quest to find spiritual peace and enlightenment, carried deep marks of inner unrest and emptiness. This restlessness was not merely born from worldly pursuits, but from a void that originated deep within the human soul. This emptiness gave him a constant feeling of searching for a meaning beyond the world. To transcend everything, to dive into the deepest corners of his mind and soul, to merge with nature, and to live a life far from the world seemed like his only solution to find peace. This journey was not only a geographical exploration, but also a spiritual one. When the young monk decided to embark on this path, both physically and spiritually, he began to question the meaning of everything he had. The love of his parents, society's values, and the comfortable life in the city could not provide him with the deep meaning of life. The constant disturbance in his mind fueled his desire to escape the chaos of the outside world. The peace he sought would be found not in the noise of the city, but in the deep, solitary caves of the high mountains. His journey toward the Himalayas was physically challenging, but spiritually profound. As he made his way toward the heart of the mountains, every step he took drew him closer to an internal void. The mountains promised him solitude and inner depth, things he had long been seeking. In the silence of nature, he dreamed of clearing his mind and breaking free from all material attachments. The mystery of the Himalayas led him to believe that a form of inner freedom was hidden at the peaks of the mountains. This would be a place where he could confront only his true self, escaping the chaos of the modern world and the desires of people. Initially, the mountains themselves tested the monk's desire for solitude during his climb. High altitudes, harsh weather conditions, and freezing cold intensified the physical challenges. Yet with each step, the monk began to shed not only his physical burdens but also his spiritual ones. With every ascent toward the mountain peaks, he was discovering more of himself and delving deeper into the emptiness within him. The silence of nature offered him the opportunity to cleanse the turmoil in his mind, and with every breath, he gained more peace. For him, this journey was not just a physical effort, but a conscious process of inner transformation. Gradually, he began to release every thought. Each step took him further from the world, leaving him alone with the pure essence of his existence. The grandeur of the mountains and nature gave him the courage to further sever his ties to the world. He felt like a small human being, but simultaneously believed that he had found an infinite peace. The silence emanating from the Himalayas began to teach him true inner wisdom. At the end of his journey, he discovered a cave in the heart of the Himalayas. This cave offered him not only a physical shelter, but also a spiritual refuge. The monk planned to stay there for a long time, as this solitude and silence would provide him with the peace and inner tranquility he sought. The cave became both a protective sanctuary and a meditation space. The monk chose to live there alone, for years, seeking to transform all the elements of nature into peace within himself. Solitude offered him the opportunity to become one with nature, completely escaping the turmoil of the outside world. He continuously asked himself the recurring questions in his mind, deeply examining each of his thoughts. While merging with the sounds and spirit of nature, he aimed to cleanse his mind and erase the traces of the past. Every day he practiced meditation, choosing to remain in a constant state of awareness. He saw himself as a being who had severed his ties with the world, but simultaneously united with the universe. The first steps he took in this cave symbolized the beginning of his spiritual quest. Here, he faced not only nature, but also his own self. Solitude gave him the chance to embark on a process of inner enlightenment. With each passing day, the emptiness within him became narrower, and he began to feel a deeper sense of peace. In the midst of his solitude, he continued his journey toward inner serenity, observing every moment carefully and analyzing every thought. This journey was about completely disconnecting from the outside world, seeking only spiritual peace. The monk's journey was not only physical, but also an inner adventure. As he advanced toward the Himalayas, each step brought him closer to a deeper connection with nature, a confrontation with his inner self, and ultimately, spiritual enlightenment. The mountain paths occasionally turned into nearly invisible trails, with rocks, stones, and dense fog making the journey increasingly difficult. Yet, each difficulty reinforced the monk's spiritual determination. It was not just his body, but his mind that was being tested on this journey. With a conscious desire to become one with nature with each step, the monk was encouraged to continue on the difficult path. As he approached the peaks of the high mountains, the world below seemed to shrink, and he was lost in the eternity of the forest, mountains, and sky. By diving into the depths of his thoughts, he tried to be fully aware of only the present moment and the surrounding nature with every step. Detaching himself from the physical world, he felt that the only way to reach inner peace was to confront solitude in the heart of nature. The mountains offered him both challenges and opportunities. Indeed, this journey was one of the most crucial steps in the monk's spiritual quest. When he finally reached his cave, the scenery around him was completely different. From the peaks of the mountains, the world below appeared distant and mundane. At that point, there was only the wild and powerful force of nature, the dark rocks, cold winds, and the depth of silence. With the entrance of the cave before him, the monk believed that, despite the harsh and cold surroundings, he would find his inner warmth. He knew how powerful purification could be when one distances oneself from nature's rigid laws. Although the cave might appear to be a simple shelter, for him, it was much more than that. In it, he would find a place to rest not only his body but also his soul. The natural shapes of the rocks on the walls, the cold surfaces bearing the deep traces of time, forced the monk to think more deeply, to confront his past. In that moment, the cave had transformed into a kind of meditation space, peaceful, yet equally challenging. At first, he had to deal with the silence and solitude of his natural surroundings. For days he stayed silent, away from people, alone, listening to his heartbeat, his breath, and the sounds of nature. The monk was reminded deep in his heart of who he truly was. The cave became both a refuge and a teacher to him, not only through meditation but also by facing the challenges that nature occasionally presented. He was learning to strike a balance between mind and soul. In this way, each passing day, he was finding the solitude and peace necessary for a person to truly discover themselves. Not only his body, but his mind and soul were being purified. During the first days in his cave, the monk was not only reflecting on the meaning of his life and the universal nature, but also fighting his inner battles. The silence was initially difficult for him. Being alone can sometimes be a person's greatest enemy, for when one is alone, inner fears, anxieties, and old traumas begin to surface. Yet the monk was aware of this inner chaos and aimed to embrace it in order to find inner peace. While attending to the needs of his body and mind through daily rituals, he also embarked on a mental journey. Before the first light of day, he would meditate, and by sunset, he would try to harmonize with his natural surroundings. All of this taught him not only to distance himself from the outer world, but also from the turmoil within himself. In the silence of nature, far from the noise of the world he had once known, he was slowly learning to descend into the depths of his heart. This place was one where he could physically be alone, yet spiritually connect with the entire universe. Every moment gave him the opportunity to discover his own truth. The cave on the mountain's peak had become not just a shelter, but his greatest teacher, the center of a quest that would transform his life. In this cave, the monk was learning not only to survive but to rebuild himself. From the moment the monk stepped into the cave, he began to lose track of time. The difference between day and night became increasingly indistinct, and living each moment with deep awareness became a ritual for him. The simple life nature provided reminded him of how simple and natural everything was, keeping him away from complex thoughts and worldly worries. Each morning, as he slowly opened his eyes, he would see the first rays of light filtering through the entrance of his cave. This beam invited him into a deep practice of meditation. Most of his days were spent on a mental journey. When the monk sat for meditation each morning, the thoughts in his mind flowed like a river. However, thanks to years of training and experience, he learned not to follow these thoughts but to simply let them pass. This was initially challenging for him, Thoughts settled in the monk's mind one by one, and he wanted to reject or fight them. However, over time, he learned to accept these thoughts as they were and let them go. He welcomed each thought as if it were a guest and allowed it to pass. As the monk deepened his meditation practice, he began to feel his body and mind evolving toward a boundless peace. This peace could neither be defined as a gloomy silence nor loneliness, for everything was flowing in its own internal rhythm. The sounds of nature, the gentle touch of the wind, the chirping of the birds, were like melodies that brought peace to the monk, leading him into a deeper awareness. His mind was lost within these sounds, realizing that everything was one and the same. However, his physical needs also existed. The monk tried to meet his body's demands with the simple life nature offered. As he ventured deeper into the forest, he discovered fruits, plants, edible roots, and water sources. Each new resource not only provided bodily satisfaction, but also strengthened his connection to nature. This simple yet profound way of living offered him not only survival, but also spiritual peace. He gathered the water he needed from the deep sources nature provided, carefully picking plants, many of which he used in harmony with the rhythm of nature itself. His mental quest, combined with the simplicity nature provided, deepened more each day. The days stretched out like consecutive parentheses, with night following day. However, each night, when the joy and intensity of the day faded, a new discovery began in the deep silence of the cave. At night, sitting alone in the cave's deep darkness, he opened the doors to his inner world. A mental purification process began. Thoughts lined up one by one, each popping and vanishing like a bubble. At some point, he would lie down without thinking, harmonizing completely with the darkness. His body and mind merged into a state of tranquility throughout the night. He questioned every thought passing through his mind, aiming to rid himself of the burdens of the past. This purification process was not easy. His mind was filled with thoughts accumulated over the years. Each of these thoughts reflected a different pain, a different memory, or a different question. The monk faced these thoughts, accepted each one, and then released them. Letting go of the burdens of the past occurred not only mentally but also spiritually. Releasing each thought offered him not only mental relief but also a deeper sense of freedom. Loneliness had been a challenge for the monk at first, but over time, this loneliness became his most valuable teacher. This loneliness was not the kind of emptiness that comes from being completely disconnected from the outside world, but rather the discovery of an inner void. He might have felt alone, yet this loneliness was a door opening into inner depth. With each passing day, this solitude became more meaningful, marking a turning point in the monk's spiritual journey. Living alone, intertwined with nature, offered him not just survival, but peace beyond that, bringing him into mental and spiritual balance. Each day, each night, the monk continued living in isolation from the world. However, over time, this solitude and inner exploration provided him with great freedom, both physically and spiritually. Purging the traces of the past and living each moment with awareness became the most important purpose of his life. With each passing day, as his thoughts were being cleansed, he drew one step closer to peace and enlightenment. As the monk began living alone in the depths of the Himalayas, his connection to nature grew stronger. Initially, nature appeared to be just an environment observed from the outside. However, over time, nature began leaving deep marks on his inner world. He started to understand not just the trees, stones, and mountains around him, but also the spiritual workings of nature. Each moment, every movement, was in harmony with the rhythm of nature. What was once foreign to him, nature, had become a part of his soul. As the days passed, the monk's bond with the serenity of nature grew stronger. The rustling of the wind, the chirping of the birds, the silence of the mountains, and the peace echoing in every corner of nature had become a part of his meditation. The monk, like a river, was swept away in these natural sounds, which opened his mind and illuminated his heart, provided him not only with external peace but also with an inner depth. What nature taught him made him realize that he was a part of the universe and that everything was connected. Especially in the mornings, watching the awakening of nature brought deep meaning to the monk. At the time when the sun began to rise, slowly, the first beam of light that filtered through the entrance of his cave was a sign for the monk. Every morning, while observing the moment when the light met nature, a feeling of unity arose. As the wind passed through the trees, the leaves rustled gently. The birds played a melody every morning. Everything worked in harmony with one another, and the monk could feel this harmony internally. As he cleared every thought in his mind, he continued to merge with nature. The stillness of the mountains, the gentle touch of the wind, the song of the birds, each one echoed in the monk's soul. These weren't just external sounds. Each represented the rhythm of the universe, the cycle of life. These sounds transformed what was once complex and requiring resolution into simple and pure tranquility. Every thought in his mind softened, disappeared, and left a trace within him, like a part of nature. Being immersed in nature not only brought peace to the monk, but also helped him understand the depths of the universe. He was learning, day by day, to move in harmony with nature. Every tree, every rock, every animal around him had something to teach him. Each day he discovered the lessons that nature offered. A tree grows patiently over many years, while the mountains remain silent for centuries. Nature offered deep meanings of patience, love, strength, and balance. The monk began to realize that every moment spent in nature was like a meditation practice. Every step, every breath, every movement taught him the meaning of life and the language of nature. When he felt himself as a part of nature, he could see the connection between all beings more clearly. The blossoming of a flower, the flight of a bird, the rippling of the wind, all of them turned into teachings. One day, as the monk walked deeper into the forest, he sat under a tree and took a deep breath. In that moment, he felt how meaningful it was for everything to be one, to be a whole. He too had once been as foreign as the forest and as lonely as the mountains. However, the acceptance of nature had given him great meaning. He was no longer just a part of nature. Nature had become a part of him. The boundaries between them had faded, and he felt as if he were one singular being. Moreover, the monk continued to find answers to his inner questions in the simplicity of nature. Although he felt unified with nature, he still sometimes questioned his identity. Nature occasionally offered him opportunities to find himself. Solitude was not only an external state, but an inner exploration, and day by day, under the guidance of nature, the monk began to understand himself more deeply. In conclusion, for the monk, nature was not just a habitat, but also a teacher. While it taught him about life, existence, balance, and peace, it also revealed the deep secrets of the universe. Every moment spent in nature not only brought him tranquility, but also deepened his spiritual understanding. As the monk lived in harmony with nature, he began to understand more clearly that everything was interconnected, and the universe worked as a whole. As the years passed, the monk underwent a significant mental transformation in the depths of his solitary life in the Himalayas. Initially, he had gone to this cave to merge with nature and find inner peace, but with the deepening of his awareness, he embarked on a new journey. Mental elevation was much more than a search for simple inner calm. Over time, the monk began to discover the deepest meanings of his own existence and the secrets of the universe. At first, the monk was only concerned with the external world: nature, trees, birds, and mountains. However, as days, weeks, and years passed, he went beyond understanding this external world. Mentally, he entered the process of examining himself, his thoughts, and his emotions. As a result of his observations and meditations, he began to develop inner awareness. At first, the most challenging thing for the monk was to make peace with the constant flow of thoughts in his mind. Every thought, every worry, and every anxiety hid something beyond escaping the external world. This, in a way, was an inner purification process for the monk. In the process of mental elevation, the monk realized that thoughts were only temporary entities. His mind was constantly filled with thoughts, and these thoughts often carried the burdens of the past or the uncertainties of the future. However, over time he began to understand that these thoughts did not reflect the truth. Every thought, every feeling, passed by like a kind of illusion. Truth was not found in the depths of thoughts or emotions. Truth was found in the awareness and depth of the present moment. This understanding in his mind granted him great freedom. The fleeting and illusory thoughts no longer affected him. This awareness brought the monk an inner tranquility. The solitude, in the cave, beyond being detached from the external world, had opened the doors to true freedom. At first, solitude had created a sense of abandonment. However, over time, this solitude transformed into a space of purification, cleansing, and rebirth. He gradually began to loosen his ties with the world, the opinions of others, societies, expectations, the identities recognized by society. All of these were temporary and deceptive. The monk sought to find the truth of his existence and his place within nature, independent of external factors. All interactions with the outside world faded like a shadow, and he continued on his journey to find inner peace. Furthermore, the monk deepened his awareness not only on a physical level, but also on an emotional and mental level. He questioned every thought and every feeling in his mind. This questioning provided him with an inner cleansing. His meditation practice gave him the ability to transcend his emotions and thoughts. Now, it was possible to observe his emotions, thoughts, and bodily sensations without becoming completely absorbed in them or identifying with them. Thoughts and feelings were accepted as part of life's temporary nature, but the monk realized that they were not the truth itself. As the days passed, what truly mattered to the monk was not only detaching from the external world, but exploring his inner world and attaining enlightenment. As he delved deeper into his meditation, he began to see the opportunities that mental enlightenment offered more clearly. As he cleared the endless ripples in his mind, he realized that truth and peace were actually present in every moment. With every breath, every thought, and every small movement, he was journeying into the depths of the universe. In that moment, he began to feel what truth truly was. One day, the monk meditated on the mountain peak. In that moment, completely detached from the external world and with no thoughts in his mind, he only felt what was present. That moment was part of his enlightenment. Mentally, no doubt, fear or thought could hinder him. Everything had become one. This moment taught the monk the truth that everything was interconnected and that everything occurred within a cycle. Everything was connected like a thread. Everything temporary ultimately transformed into the eternal. This process, in a way, was like learning the language of nature and the universe. The rhythm of nature and its silent teachings echoed in the monk's inner world. Mental elevation not only illuminated his thoughts, but also brought him closer to a perception of universal truths. What once seemed complex and unknown now appeared clear and transparent with deep understanding. Knowing that everything was temporary, he was trying to understand the eternal amidst all these changes. In the end, when the monk began to attain enlightenment not only from the external world but also from the depths of his inner world, he found true peace and freedom. Mental elevation enabled him to become one with the entire universe, not just as a being. And this elevation was not just a mental state, it also encompassed a spiritual transformation and universal awareness. In this long journey, the monk had discovered not only his own inner journey, but also the meaning of all existence. After 30 years, the monk completed his retreat in the solitary cave of the Himalayas. He had reached a point where his inner transformation was complete. The deep understandings he had gained mentally and spiritually had not only brought him peace but also true freedom and tranquility. The years spent in the silence of nature had allowed him to accept the impermanence and changeability of everything, while also enabling him to appreciate the value of every moment. This process, through which he gained inner peace and deep awareness, had made him a different person. Indeed, the monk was no longer just a man distant from the external world, but a being who had undergone an inner transformation. His life in the cave had increased his alienation from the outside world and people. However, this had shaped him not as a stranger, but as a sage. Solitude had not only been an external separation, but also an internal purification process. True solitude had given the monk a new perspective. Now, solitude was not a burden, but a teacher. He had made peace with it and learned from it. Solitude had made him a patient, serene, and aware person. He had become a person who questioned every thought, observed every emotion, and lived every moment with awareness. He had become one with nature and the universe, for nature had taught him and shown him that everything is connected. The long period of 30 years spent without face-to-face contact with any human being had reconciled him with himself and his inner world. Inner peace made any interaction with the outside world unnecessary. The monk had focused solely on his inner journey, without expecting society or people to notice his existence. However, he eventually decided to return to the outside world. This decision was not just a simple return, but also a moment of evolution and transformation. After years spent immersed in nature, he now knew that he could create his inner peace in the outer world as well. As he returned to the outside world, the monk had no intention of offering advice or forming a community. For him, the return was simply an opportunity to reconnect with society as a being and share his inner peace with others. When people first saw him, they looked at him in astonishment. What kind of relationship could a man who had lived alone on mountain peaks for 30 years have with society? But over time, the monk began to influence people with his calmness and profound peace. His presence became a source of inner wisdom and tranquility. Everyone perceived him in different ways. Some saw him as a sage, others considered him a mystic. But for the monk, all these labels had lost their meaning. He had simply lived the teachings of nature and his inner world, finding true peace in inner stillness. When the monk returned to the outside world, he carried a deep calmness and peace in his communication with others. Without needing any words, he could bring peace to others just by his presence. However, for him, true wisdom was not about giving advice to others or conforming to societal norms. Wisdom lay in the harmony with nature and the universe. True peace came from inner awareness and accepting each moment as it is. Many people were affected by the monk, witnessing the results of his years of retreat. His life showed how deep a transformation could take place in the inner world of a man who had lived away from the outer world for so long. However, the monk quickly realized the interest that society had in him. People began to see his solitude and meditation not as a form of weakness or estrangement, but as a source of power and wisdom. He had managed to remain just a human, beyond society's standards. They had seen how a person's existence gains meaning through deep connections with nature. In the end, the monk's return was not just a change of place. Through years of solitude and meditation, he had transformed himself in an inner sense. This transformation had transcended him beyond everything. Although people saw him as a sage, he was truly a person who had lived the teachings of nature and inner peace. He had made peace with solitude and had united with nature. True wisdom lay in being aware of every moment in nature, leaving the past and future aside, and living in the present. When the monk returned to the outside world, he conveyed this wisdom to others without the need for words or teachings. Because he had found his inner stillness and peace, not just from the external world, but from his own inner world.